Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for coming along to our third session, Mission-Driven Procurement, Aligning Government Spending with Purpose and Impact. Now, if you are ardent followers of the procurement world, you will no doubt have definitely not missed the flurry of new legislation and policy that came into effect towards the end of last month. And with that, very much a renewed sense of a government mission to put the country back into the service of working people, and one of the ways in which they are seeking to achieve that is using procurement as a lever to drive positive change and achieve the 5 missions laid out in the National Procurement Policy Statement. Now, through that, I think the outcome of procurement teams across the country is absolutely clear, and that is to ensure we're delivering value for money, driving sustainable growth and raising living standards across the UK. So today what we'll do is explore mission-driven procurement in a little bit more practice, and also ask the question, are the recent changes radical enough? Is there room to go a little bit further? Joining me today we have Steve Mason, founder of Scope Zero UK and a Unitary Councillor in Local Government, Richard Dickinson, founder of Social Value Business and Social Value Quality Mark, and Danny Aberg, Head of Social Value and Consulting at Thrive. So just before we get stuck in, I'm just going to hand over to the guys just to give a quick 30-second intro, just so we find out a little bit more about them and also what they're all about. So Danny, would you like to kick off?
Indeed. Hi everybody, I am Danny, Head of Social Impact and Consulting at Thrive. We are a tech startup business, hopefully driving the radical innovations that we've heard everybody talk about recently. We are a measurement platform for social sustainability, really looking to support businesses to understand, measure and manage their impact in order to kind of amplify it and keep kind of developing the right initiatives that drive kind of mission-driven practice in reality, as opposed to being that theoretical thing that floats about over here. My role is predominantly around consulting. I have a background in community development at the grassroots for many, many years, and then heading up large sustainability in large construction businesses. So hopefully I'm bringing a lot to the table in terms of sitting on both sides of the fence in understanding the public sector perspective, as well as really also understanding the supplier perspective and what they need in terms of support to drive that forward with purpose.
My name is Richard Dickinson, as kindly introduced. I'm the director and founder of the Social Value Business and Social Value Quality Mark, one of which is a micro business and the other one is actually a social enterprise, so purpose-driven as opposed to purely profit-driven. We're in existence purely to help organisations trust and also understand what actually social value and social sustainability is, whether it's accelerated learning, whether it's development, personal growth or economic growth. We look at that maturity and model what that looks like both now and in the future.
Hi, my name's Steve. I'm a councillor. I probably won't name the council. You can look it up because I might have a few comments about the council's operations. But my Scope Zero, we focus particularly on community engagement, building social licence. It's not a word I've heard yet, but social licence is something that we should be really talking about, because without social licence we can't deliver a lot of the projects. As a councillor, I'm quite interested in the policy side of this as well. I think there's opportunity to build into the way we spend our money as a local authority, maximising social value, not necessarily just in procurement, but in a lot of our service provision as well.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, guys. So I'd like to start by looking at the NPPS, the National Procurement Policy Statement, specifically. So it has set really clear expectations about how procurement should drive broader economic and social outcomes. That's obviously translated through to the updated social value model. How do we actually start to move from policy, though, into the practical national impact delivery? So Danielle, I'd like to come to you first of all. Since the launch of the Act, have you seen any kind of significant behavioural shifts? What's the kind of the overall reaction been?
The overall kind of broad reaction has been generally quite positive right across the piece. I think there is a recognition that the shift is kind of necessary and also quite overdue in some regards. But it's still early days. People are trying to get their heads around, right, in theory, the implications of the new Act are positive. They are very much seen to be driving more purpose-aligned practice. But obviously, it really comes down to how that is then implemented and I suppose the subjective nature of how it is interpreted and then applied. In terms of behaviours, I think we've definitely seen a marked increase in commissioners coming and asking for help and saying, actually, you know, this is quite new. It's driving us in the right direction, and we're not really sure how to fully interpret that, particularly when we hear things, when we're talking about proportional and relevant. You know, what does that mean in practice? So, you know, commissioners are coming to us very much to help them understand how to build the right strategy, the right policies, and to implement it in a way that is sustainable from the outset, as opposed to having to try and retrofit later on as you know, things start falling down. And then from a contractor perspective, I think very much they're still in learning mode, again, trying to understand you know, what it means for them, but that application piece, you know, so KPIs being contractualised, it's something that we had seen in 0620, which is the first social value model, but it is now mandatory. So that is kind of definitely pushing people to step up a little bit and really think about the commitments and promises they're making. I think me and Richard had a conversation earlier about how actually, you know, social value in and of itself and the commitments that people are making need to be well intentioned and actually we have seen in the past poor behaviours where people are kind of driving to the highest, the highest number to win a contract, as opposed to something that is realistic and deliverable. So I think we're starting to see that shift from a supplier perspective in understanding that, you know, that they need to really think about how this is going to impact them now, because, you know, this drives further accountability in social value delivery. So it's now not just about what you can promise, it's about actually being able to deliver that once the award is made.
It's really interesting. I think just picking up on your point there around the kind of poor behaviours that we've seen previously. So, Richard, just bring you in. What do you think the immediate priorities need to be, and actually to avoid the kind of repetition of those poor behaviours that we've seen in the past?
Communication and education, as simple as that. Actually, just going on that first point, we see a lot of panic from the public side. A lot of panic in what to do, how to do it, how far, how mature the marketplace is, because it isn't ready, but it's here. To quote a person from the MOJ at an event I attended a few months back, they said it's the biggest seismic shift in procurement in their lifetime. That's how they saw it. So from that point of view, this is about then how can the individual departments, organisations, Quangos, you name it, can actually communicate what is needed from their point of view and actually then communicate that out, but not focus on a number. It's focus on the legacy that a contract can hold. And it's that contract legacy what actually will drive change, ultimately. If they can do that, then great. And also it's about the weighting on these tenders. Everyone knows a 10% weighting. Yep, no problem at all. 10% is an eye-opener. When you start to talk about 20, 30, 40, we've seen a 60% weighting towards social value in a government tender. That's no longer a would like. That's no longer an eye-opener. That's actually a must-have, business critical, essential.
Fantastic, and I think it's a really kind of key point actually to bring Stevie on. I know you're passionate about sustainability and passionate about environmental value. Do you feel from the legislation that's been announced and policies that have come in, has there been any kind of missed opportunity from your point of view, especially kind of drawing on your experiences within local government and as a council?
You mentioned communication. I think communication is really important. We're talking about social value here, and we've had this discussion where environmental value is built into social value, but it's not obvious. Yeah. And I think with the Procurement Act, it is a bit of a missed opportunity to understand that we talk about weighted contracts and we're looking for outcomes and value going forward for the community. Well, building those environmental values into it is really important. And every council has declared a climate emergency. They're all talking about this, but how they deliver that is still within the climate team. And I think the communications between the commissioning and procurement team needs to happen at the start, rather than, okay, we've got this project now. What do we do? How do we procure? Because then the procurement team come back and they're like, well, actually, we've got these barriers. But I think transparency is really key. I think data is really key, particularly when it comes to environmental part of it. Measuring the emissions, we're all doing it, but we need to be putting those into the council plans, into make it the obligation of the council to deliver this, and then we can generate innovation, supply chains accordingly to meet those goals through procurement.
And who, from your perspective, whose responsibility does that lie with? Who should be driving that?
Well, I would hope the councils would be, because they have the plans, they're developing council plans with these fantastic things they want to do and obligations, but I'm not seeing them actually critically analyse themselves enough. So you get a result here, but it can be quite ambiguous. Well, yes, but we've got impacts here, or then maybe a finance officer then puts a blocker on lots of it. So there's lots of siloed thinking, I think, is a problem, and communication, back to communication, is a really key part of how the departments talk to each other. And then that council plan can be delivered. And that council plan can be delivered there, another council there, and our government commitments then can be delivered as well. So it's very much a bottom-up approach.
So I guess in the sense of, it kind of brings us nicely onto looking at different types of procurement models then, or different ways of doing things. Have you seen any particular methods or different approaches, I guess, over the last kind of few years where actually you think that would be a fantastic initiative, or that would work brilliantly within local government, and that's something they should more broadly adopt? Have you kind of come across anything?
We've been trying to develop a dedicated framework around net zero, but we've been hitting the barriers ourselves. We're seeing finance coming in. The public sector can't afford to pay for it all. We need the finance coming in, the blended finance projects, in particular philanthropy coming as well. But they need that trust. So we need to put procurement, I think, can be that trust. So we're managing the contracts, we're managing the companies, we're making sure they're transparent. At the same time, that puts the element of trust in to bring the finance in. So am I seeing anything coming through? Yes, I'm seeing projects like Connected Places, for instance. I'm seeing some stuff come through in Innovate UK. But I'm not yet seeing, and it may be my experience as a councillor, and other councillors may be doing slightly better, but I'm not seeing it yet transform itself into using procurement as the driver for sustainability in particular.
So I guess moving into kind of innovation then, so we know procurement is expected to deliver an impact, and I think for that to be successful, there's always an element of you have to kind of challenge the status quo. So if our goal is to ensure that taxpayer money is actually delivering positive outcomes, taking the kind of legislation we have, how do we start to actively encourage the different types of methods of delivery, that both are, I guess, one, offering a transparent kind of auditable trail, but also starting to deal with the more kind of unique community needs. And I think by that, historically, there's kind of there's always been a bit of a one-size-fits-all approach, especially from social value delivery. How do we start to kind of move from that? So I think, Danielle, from a tech perspective, I know it's obviously, Thrive are a great example of how you can use technology and data to really kind of support the public sector in the work that they've been doing. And if people followed Keir Starmer's speech last week, we know that tech and specifically AI is very much on the forefront of the government agenda. How can we start to better use data and technology to, one, I guess, measure social value effectively, but also start to enable better methods of delivery, but also enable the more targeted and kind of focused impact that we're trying to achieve?
Yeah. I mean, there's a million and one things we probably need to do in terms of moving that conversation forward. There's always this battle around data and social and the balance between kind of data and stories and personal experience. And, but they're two sides of the same coin. You have to have both in order to make macro change. And I think this is the thing that we often get stuck on. We work in procurements, we work in projects, we work in political terms, but actually if we're trying to make an impact around social sustainability, that is macro and that is systemic change, and that only happens when we really understand what the challenges are at that macro level in order to start really kind of directing the commitments and directing the capabilities we have within our supply chains to the right areas. Now, I think, the legislation and what we're doing through procurement is great. It's definitely a step in the right direction, particularly, now engaging KPIs and contractualizing them in a way that means there has to be accountability after the contract award, as opposed to that being something that is often quite opaque. But I think that there definitely needs to be that ownership, I suppose, within the public sector, because they're there for the long term, regardless of all these different changes in political areas. They're there for the long term, and they're the people who can really drive that collaboration between all these different contractors. Now, when we talk about data, you often see platforms like ourselves, are being driven by private sector. And often they are available and being used, by contractors more so than kind of public sector departments. And I think one of the key things now in thinking about social value moving forward and through procurement is, how do we capture and use that data afterwards? What are we getting back from our contractors? How do we make it simple for them to do those reports? But then how do we analyse that data, and how do we ensure that the data coming back from them in all these different formats has some kind of interoperability? So, that you can have different ways of collecting data or different target outputs, but actually you could still see that bigger picture. And I think one of the key things with that is ensuring that we have real clarity, potentially from the social value model on what are we trying to achieve and what are the indicators of that, and how do we use them to drive conversations at different levels. We need to use AI and things like that to analyse local needs, through needs analysis and those kind of things. But we also need to use data to drive the right behaviours at a commercial level, and within corporate businesses. So, we are starting to see that come through, and social sustainability have a place at board level, but that is still very new, and it's very kind of seedling, but we are starting to see it. And the reason we're starting to see it is we've got businesses who've been doing this for a long time, being able to really leverage that data to demonstrate how it links directly to a business bottom line. And I think that's the kind of shift we need. We need to continue that on a kind of contractor side, but we absolutely need to see more investment from public sector across different councils and across devolved nations, as opposed to everybody running in silos, where all that data can come together so we can really understand and drive the right insights and the right kind of evolution of this policy moving forward.
That's a big bugbear of yours, isn't it? This kind of working in silos within...
It is a bugbear. You're completely right, because I work with a couple of other insurance companies, actually, and we're advising them not to social wash and greenwash themselves. And you mentioned ownership. So, in the private sector, you've got ESG and corporate social governance taking ownership. I'm not seeing that, apart from the political claims, and that's not happening as much in the public sector. And I think that's the key piece. If we can put some sort of, maybe it's a regulation, maybe it's a policy, maybe we need to make more of them statutory goals. The ownership then becomes in the public sector and local authorities. That's what residents expect them to. They think that's what their local authority is going to be doing for them, to make their community better. But at the moment, all you see as a councillor now is people's emails coming going, what are you doing about this? What are you doing about this? And it's exactly the same, but businesses are already doing it. We just need to learn maybe from the private sector a bit more.
Just picking up on, I guess, a couple of your points earlier on, Danielle, especially around the kind of the data and the integrity and the actual delivery of what people are setting out to do. And I guess your experience, specifically through the quality mark, Richard, what needs to happen in this area to ensure that the UK public is actually getting the impact and the purposeful procurement that they've been promised? Because we all know that actions speak louder than words, but actually, how are we making sure that the commitments of the supply chain are being signed up to deliver, or making the commitment to deliver? What's the kind of the follow through from that in terms of contract delivery?
There's quite a few things, to be fair. I think, first of all, it comes down to public's knowledge. Public does not understand social value. it's a term they're not familiar with. So how can they actually hold anybody to account if they don't actually understand what it is? The second thing, actually, something for Steve, I was thinking just when we were chatting with Danielle earlier on, was actually, if you were aware of what was going on in your area by your supply chain, and actually what they've determined the value they'll deliver, you could then champion locally.
Yeah.
And therefore feed it through into the policy. Also, you have organisations who do this anyway and have business as usual, but unfortunately there is social washing. So think about this slightly different perhaps and go, okay, rather than just having your KPIs, which are generally your head, your business, your brain, your money, your financial compliance, why don't I have KVIs, key value indicators, which balances the heart and head and actually demonstrates very clearly to general public, commissioners, these are still corporate objectives. We've got ownership, we've got a drive, we've got the policies, we've got the procedures, everything in place, and we're going to hold ourselves to account. If you can do that and then have a model, whether it's a quality mark or whatever, to be able to track the maturity, implementation and behaviour, then you can start to trust what you're going to receive. And actually, very simplistically put, younger people are making decisions based on ethics and values.
Yeah.
So actually, this is no longer, actually, your business, should be doing it. Actually, there's a key benefit. Attracting the right talent, developing your own products and services and innovation, and retaining that talent as well.
I think it's a really interesting point, and just to kind of pick up on, in terms of the kind of the next generation that's coming through, who we know are going to have to drive and take this action forward. From a constituency perspective, Steve, what are you seeing in terms of the people you're interacting with who are kind of, the next in line to carry this mantle forward? What's their kind of view and appetite?
To be honest, engaging young people on politics is incredibly difficult, and that's one of the biggest barriers we have in all of this is the political leadership in delivering social value. Trying to communicate social value, even to my colleagues, is like, or they think it's just a grant they can give people. But we do have suppliers in my local area who want to engage. They're delivering for the private sector. So it could be renewable energy companies, but they're not getting through the barriers of procurement yet because either they're too small. We touched it on the previous sessions. Those barriers are there. They've got enough with the private sector at the moment, with the retrofits, even working with social housing companies, to actually engage properly to develop a bigger scale project. But there is innovation coming through, and there is support from local companies into projects. We just have to frame the projects in a different way. We're looking at an environmental DNA project, doing a survey of the river catchment. We're working with the council, but we're going to try and get sponsorship from local companies, and they're more than willing. We have to bring those sort of things in, and that collaborative partnership will then allow me to go back to the council and design a regional plan for better development, economic development, tourism, based on the fact that we found nature.
So it's just staying, I guess, on the topic of suppliers. So SMEs, traditionally we know that they are, they find it very either difficult to compete with the public sector, or to actually they find that dealing with the public sector can be quite difficult in itself. So what do you think, Steve, from taking both of your kind of lenses here, what do we need to do on both sides of the fence to actually encourage more supplier-led solutions, but also to start to break down the barriers that you just talked about in terms of actually bringing these types of suppliers? Because SMEs have got amazing ideas. This is where brilliant innovation happens in these types of businesses. But how do we make it easier for them to start to come into the
This is where I think the procurement frameworks can help, and rather than just being the managers of the system, to actually start being fostering the innovation. Bringing in partnerships together, putting suppliers in the room with the right buyers. And that is the climate team. I'm still focused on climate team and the procurement team at the same time. And there is, because of the trust that comes from the framework managers, there's a key element into this. I've already mentioned it before with attracting private finance. And I think that I think is the thing that we could probably do the best. I mean, it's been touched on already, how innovation, supporting companies when they get to a certain point as well. Councils, public sector, should be more aware of being able to support those companies just to get over that last piece, because they can be the drivers of change. They can be a partner in some of this stuff as well, to then generate potential income for local authorities as well. The local authorities set up their own companies doing some of the services themselves. So they can partner in. They just need, I say, the business as usual attitude is still very much a blocker. And that can, if we can just break that through and give confidence to some of the officers in particular to step into that arena, I think we can see some transformational change.
So Danielle, coming back to you, what lessons do you think then can we take forward? So how can we start to strengthen the engagement that SMEs are having with procurement teams and actually creating a more kind of collaborative environment?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously the NPPS talks about early market engagement. We need to see that happen, and we need to see it happen quickly, but also in a really focused way. You know, I know there's been lots of conversations even on the internet this week around how you know, a huge framework gave 2 days notice for the market engagement. Yep. You know, 2 days notice. How are we expecting people to come and engage in a meaningful way if we are not engaging them at the outset with purpose? And particularly when you talk about the you know, social and environmental aspect, often in that market engagement, they're left out, or they're really just kind of a token kind of add-on. We need to start thinking about engaging those conversations about what social and environmental commitments and innovations can be made, where the capabilities are from the outset, before the TENS documents are even written. I mean, we have to start at that point, and those conversations need to happen there. And then, you know, that is really going to help shape those procurements. So, you know, often we are driving SMEs out of the market before they even get a chance to engage. So from a commercial perspective, obviously that might be insurance thresholds, it could be payment terms, you know, or kind of, you know, risk-related kind of restrictions. Even if they get past that, you then have people saying, right, well, we've got this really fixed approach to social and environmental. If you can't do these, then you can't compete. Yep. So if you are an IT startup business, you have to deliver this many new jobs in this local area. They're not based there. They don't have that capacity. They physically could not deliver. Yet, we have communities across the UK that have digital exclusion. You know, there's so many innovative things that those businesses could do to support us. And we have to be enabling those conversations. And I think, you know, I'll finish kind of on that point in the sense of social value isn't localism. Localism has been driven by political agendas, and in some senses and in some certain situations, it is absolutely the right thing to do. But that's where proportional and relevant come in. We need to be able to define them in a way that understands that, you know, if we look at MMC as an example, you know, if I've got a community, a rural community, maybe in an area where, say, nuclear decommissioning is happening, we've got this huge risk around jobs and livelihoods in that region. Why would I not allow my suppliers to support the MMC in that region, to support the economy in that region, as opposed to kind of really forcing a box into my local community that may not have those same needs?
Fantastic. Just conscious of time. I think we're about to literally run out. So thank you very much for coming along today. Really, really appreciate the insights you guys have shared. Thank you to you all as well for taking time to come to us or come to our sessions. We will be back for our fourth and final session, the future of procurement, innovation, impact and agility at 2 p.m. Please come back then. We'll do a full Q&A with the panelists that are here. Everyone will be returning. But for now, I believe it's lunchtime. So go and enjoy your lunch, and we'll see you in an hour.